Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. What was a gaffe on the U.S. campaign trail is no laughing matter. We're asking, what is Aleppo? What with the carpet bombing of rebel-held parts of the city and some of the fiercest fighting we've seen since a 7-day truce fell in tatters. With us to talk about it, activist and lecturer Abdelkader Zalka. Welcome back as well. To Régis Le Sommier, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Paris Match, who's just back from a trip to Aleppo. Dr. Zahir Salour, Senior Advisor to the Syrian American Medical Society, and National Public Radio reporter Alison Muse, who is with us from Beirut. Welcome back to all of you. Before we continue the debate, a message from the Syrian Tourism Ministry. Yes, the France 24 observers fact-checked this promotional video released just a few days ago, touting the virtues of Aleppo. Régis Le Sommier, is this the city that you saw?
No, actually part of it is there is the hotel we stayed in, which is in this video, except they're doing extra care and not showing any damage or any front line or anything. I don't know why they do that. They did exactly the same one in Latakia, showing people, you know, around the coastal area having fun. I guess they're trying to make a case that, you know, some parts of Syria have been untouched, but I don't believe that. I mean, the whole you know, even the western neighborhood, you have some parts that are intact, but a lot of buildings, when you look at them, have been hit by various devices. So it's I don't know the purpose of this, honestly.
Let's take a look at some of the pictures taken by French photojournalist Noël Kidu, who is with you on this assignment for Paris Match. Our producers can show maybe.
Yeah, the opening one is important because it shows people clinging to. No, not this one. That was not the opening one.
Whenever this is in there, you go.
That's the type of vision that you have all around the city, where these people don't want to live their flat. They don't want to fall into refugee camps, because there are refugee camps all over the city, and and so they prefer to, you know, risk living, you know, on the edge like this instead of living their apartment.
Abdelkader Zalka, your reaction to this picture?
First of all, I should explain something. Gentleman here is trying to deny something that the regime himself is showing.
I'm not siding with the regime or with the rebels.
You are denying
that
it's
true.
I did
my best in showing out of a difficult situation.
The regime.
And
back to the last question.
And you're an activist and I'm a reporter, which is very different.
But I live there and I know exactly what is happening. There is not even single person from Al-Nusra inside Aleppo city. And he said something about Noordin Zenki. They joined Jabhat Sham, which is completely wrong. They joined Jaish al-Fatah. They joined Jaish al-Fatah, which is Al-Nusra, part of Jaish al-Fatah. They didn't join.
Slight difference.
But it makes a lot.
What? You mean you really truly believe they're out of Al-Qaeda?
And it's from outside Aleppo, not inside Aleppo. It's from outside Aleppo, not inside Aleppo.
But these nuances are lost to many of our viewers, okay?
Yeah.
They see that a lot of the people have had, as Dr. Salour was saying, you have to align yourselves, and sometimes you're aligning yourself with Islamist radicals when you're fighting the government.
And they're very efficient, good soldiers.
Dr. Salour said something very important, because, you know, like, people are left behind, and civilians, they are desperate. If even if the evil came to help them, they will join. They will ask him to help them, because you are talking about 3 months of besieging Aleppo, which contains 300,000 of civilians, and there is no food, there is no humanitarian aid, and the only humanitarian aid was coming to inside Aleppo was hit by the Russians in Urim, west of Aleppo, and they denied that, but it was proved by everyone. And only last September, almost 700 civilians were being killed. One 171 are children and 51 are women. And
But can you quote your sources? I did quote my sources.
yeah,
I
yeah,
actually
it's,
used the opposition figures.
Syrian Network for Human Rights, and Syrian Institute for Human Rights and Accountability, and 15 doctors and nurses were killed by the regime and Russians, and 6 civil defense members and 5 civil defense centers were being hit, and 13 ancient places and 2 schools and 6 medical facilities were being hit.
Right. Let me bring in Alison Muse here. Again, I asked the question: have we reached a tipping point?
If I could go back briefly to that video
Sure.
that you've brought up, I think it's unfair, I think, and as we know, the state media tells the story they want to tell since the beginning, and I'm in touch with people from both sides of Aleppo daily. I was speaking to a young man from West Aleppo, the government-held side last night, and he was talking about how there are no young men between 25 and 40 years old like him. Everybody has left. Many don't want to serve in the military. People he knows who have served in the military, they've been in it for 6 years, and industry has gone way down. Aleppo was known as the industrial capital, as we know. Many of those factories were overrun when the rebels entered the city in 2012. Many have been looted or destroyed. And so people, the problem is Syrians, they don't see a future, and I'm hearing that from all sorts of Syrians, that they can see they're not in charge of their future. Every time the rebels get more weapons from their backers, the regime side will double down. And so we're in this vicious cycle, and we don't see any end in sight. And now with the breakdown of this US and Russian-backed truce, people are really just wondering, how long is this going to go on?
From my perspective, yes, from my perspective as a physician and humanitarian, really all what we care about is for this bombing of civilians and hospitals to stop. I think we have really to differentiate between who is fighting what and what is the bombing is targeting. When we talk about targeting civilians, whether they are living in Western Aleppo or Eastern Aleppo, it's the same. It is repugnant, it is morally wrong, and it should stop. When we're talking about stopping water and electricity from civilians, whether they are in East or the West, it's the same. And I think what we are talking about, physicians at least, is defending medical neutrality. Doctors and nurses should have the right to treat individuals in time of conflict, in time of war, without being targeted or attacked or killed. We're talking about 750 doctors and nurses who were killed in Syria since the beginning of the crisis, according to Physicians for Human Rights. More than 263 hospitals were targeted, mostly by the Assad regime and lately the Russians. So these people who are killed in Eastern Aleppo are civilians. Yes, they are people who are fighting, and some of them are extremists, and from both sides. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about stopping the bombing of civilians and getting access to children who are right now starving to death in Eastern Aleppo. In Western Aleppo, you have roads going. You have United Nations agency going and providing food and vegetables and baby milk. In Eastern Aleppo, we are seeing pictures of children and videos of children who have kwashiorkor and marasmus. These are conditions of severe malnutrition, similar to the pictures that we were seeing in Madaya a few months ago. And if the war does not move because of these pictures, does not move because hospitals are bombed and targeted, then I don't know what will move the war. I mean, we have situations
Let me ask you about that, Dr. Salou, because when there was that 7-day ceasefire last month, we saw that those aid trucks stay stuck at the Turkish border. We could perhaps show the map for that. When you saw that the aid was never going to get through to Aleppo, what did you think at the time?
I mean, I was angry at the United Nations, at the WHO, at the US government, my government. How come that they did not take care of these details before announcing that they will get aid to Aleppo? It's very simple. You have one road going from Turkey to Aleppo. It takes 45 minutes for the aid trucks to go through. So how come that they announced about this big deal, ceasefire, and getting the aid to the population in Aleppo, 300,000, among them 85,000 children, without taking care of these details until what we know when the bombing happened and they bombed this UN convoy? I think it's really, at this point, I'm disappointed not at the Syrian regime or the Russians. I mean, these are barbaric regimes who are killing people since the beginning of the crisis. And I have family members who live in government-controlled areas, by the way. And we provide care and medical relief to hospitals in government-controlled areas. To us, everyone is the same. But when the international community, France, United Kingdom, the United States, see these things happening for the past 5 years and do not interfere to stop the bombing on civilians in getting a humanitarian corridor or doing some no bombing zone or safe zone to protect civilians.
Dr. Salou, I saw a petition on that appearing this week, getting a humanitarian aid corridor. What would it take?
I think we've done it in Srebrenica, we've done it in Sarajevo during the Bosnian conflict. I'm not an expert, probably the reporter, I forgot your name, but probably you're experienced in these issues. In prior conflicts, we had bombings of civilians and areas under siege, and the United Nations and other coalitions intervened, and they had humanitarian corridors, protection of civilians. They allowed aid in, sustained aid, not controlled by the Syrian regime that allows only trickling of the aids to areas and forcing the population out, like what happened in Madaya and old city of Homs. This should have happened long time ago. We should not wait until the population are starved to death, then surrender, then forced out of their neighborhoods and cities. What's happening in Syria is ethnic cleansing, but we don't call it ethnic cleansing.
Régis Le Sommier, what would it take for this humanitarian aid corridor to happen?
Well, I think it would take definitely an agreement on both sides. I agree with what would have been said about this. There's been this truce who was declared, those talks between Kerry and Lavrov, and why did it was not immediately followed by those measures, and why was not was the convoy not allowed to enter? Actually, I went to Castello Road when I was in Aleppo. I crossed.
It was bombed, not allowed. It was bombed.
No, but
in Ure.
Yeah. Okay. I know you have an agenda. I don't.
I don't have an agenda.
I'm talking about the corridor was there. The Castello Road was the Syrian army had evacuated, and for a reason there was this bombing of Syrian soldiers by the coalition in Deir ez-Zor, who actually ripped the truth apart, because the Russians and the Syrian army said, why do you kill our soldiers? Why three different strikes on Syrian army in Deir ez-Zor where 90 soldiers were killed, right in the middle of the truce. And they said, they apologized. You had Samantha Power and the United Nations say it was a mistake. I don't believe personally a mistake would take 3 strikes in order to realize, and especially with the surveillance material that they have, they perfectly knew it was Syrian soldiers that they were hitting.
Well,
I don't know why they did that.
About the United States?
I can say maybe you're right about the Russians firing the humanitarian, but it came after that. And to me, it really looked like you hit us, we hit you. Honestly, it was something like that. And then from that point on, the truth failed completely.
Yeah, okay.
So what I witnessed on the road, I must say that some convoy, but they were mostly going to the neighborhood of Al-War, which is in Homs, which is being, evacuated, so there were some
displaced.
Yes, and the fighters who've chosen to keep on fighting have been allowed to join Idlib and the Idlib province and have been shipped there through buses. So there was some aid coming up or waiting to go on our way down when we left Aleppo, but we saw no convoy. Castello Road was empty, and it has been empty since.
Alison Muse, let me ask you, because you just heard Régis Le Sommier say that unless the U.S. and Russia get back to the table, there can't be a humanitarian aid corridor.
As I understand, there was a genuine effort to open the Castello Road, in Aleppo, which would have meant aid coming from the government side to the opposition side. Now, the Syrian regime's big goal in all of this is to be seen as the only legitimate provider. This is why they were so hostile to aid coming from across the Turkish border. And it's not completely clear to me what exactly happened with Castello Road. The regime kept giving assurances. Their guys were pulling back. The rebels didn't trust the regime. There was a popular rebel commander that said it should not go from there. It should go from Ramuse. It should go from Turkey. So it's a bit of a mess, and certainly the U.S. raids on the Syrian army positions didn't help anything. And I wanted to just raise one point about Dr. Salul mentioned ethnic cleansing. I think we can say there's no doubt that the regime and its allies want to ensure that they are seen as the providers and at the same time make life unbearable in the opposition-held areas with these just systematic strikes.
So,
but
Alison,
we can also
if they
say with Aleppo,
on that point, Alison, if they take Aleppo, what does the government do with the city? Let's say that Damascus takes over all of Aleppo. How can they control the city? What would happen afterwards?
I mean, if I may answer,
it will probably follow in like the examples. Sorry. It will probably follow like the examples we've seen before. And number one, I don't think we can say it's been ethnic cleansing. I think you can say there's sectarian cleansing and displacement across the country, whether intended or not. But with the regime, when they have an area that the people are holding out and the rebels are standing their ground, and they finally, after years of siege, give in, usually what either happens is the rebels and their families will go to other rebel-held areas, and local inhabitants can stay, or in the case of some sieges, we've seen people relocated to other areas nearby, in the case of Daraya. And some people in the opposition, they see this as just changing the demography. And as for the regime, they say, nope, we need to weed out the terrorists and we need to separate the civilians from the fighters, and they see this as a legitimate process. But after years, there's so much distrust that few believe this is a genuine reconciliation, but that is what the government presents it as.
All right, lots of reactions on the hashtag F24debate. One, U.S. must not engage in airstrikes or ground ops against the Syrian Arab army. Let Syria take Aleppo and write off the terrorist proxies as lost. Zahir Salul, where you are in Chicago, I suppose you're hearing a lot of that kind of talk.
I mean, I think at this point, we're kind of very disappointed, to say the least, at what the United States government have done or did not do in Syria. I think when you say that there are certain red lines and then you don't enforce them, then that will allow barbaric regimes like the Syrian regime and the Russians to do whatever they want with impunity. What we have seen in Syria, a new normal that has been formed in the last few years, where chemical weapons are used with impunity. More than 168 times chemical weapons were used in Syria, and we published that in a report called A New Normal, Ongoing Chemical Weapon Use in Syria. We've seen targeting of hospitals and doctors becoming the new normal, which is basically erasing the 150 years of advancement since the Geneva Convention. We're seeing the use of starvation and siege being used routinely in Syria. More than 800,000 people under siege, according to the United Nations, starving people until they surrender and die. This is a barbaric Middle Ages tactics that's been used with impunity. Yes, I mean, I believe that the international community, the United Nations Security Council, including the United States, my government, should do anything necessary to protect civilians. And I think at this point, the civilians in Syria are the victims of political game, as your hosts have been mentioned, guests have mentioned, between the United States and Russia, or Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Iran. And it's unfortunate that the Syrian children like Umran and many Umrans like him are the victims of these political games, and they are the ones who are losing. I mean, Syrians are losing, whether they live in eastern Aleppo or western Aleppo. When you destroy a landmark, historic landmark in old city of Aleppo, this is a loss to all Syrians and to all humanity.
Yes, I must say, to follow up on this, when I visited the old city, it's really, I mean, I've visited a number of neighborhood, Bani Zaid in particular, who's been destroyed by airstrike, but the old city was very, very moving, because it's been, you had mosque from, the Mamluk time, from the 13th century, that had been blown up. everything has been destroyed. I put out on my Facebook a video of what used to be the Swiss consulate, and it's near the caravanserai, and this has been completely destroyed. And this was done, I mean, you can see some traces of fighting, but most of it was destroyed by ammunition, you know, like purposely destroyed. So I can't know, I know the rebels used to be there, and maybe they left and they blew it up. I don't know what happened, but it's a shame. Honestly, when you look at, it's one of the oldest city in the world, and all these treasures have been are completely gone.
There is something very important. They show that video about the tourism and everything, but they didn't show the castle, which is the oldest castle in the world, and it's the regime is using.
It's a war zone. The castle is a war zone.
The regime is using it as a military base with a lots of soldiers and snipers.
No, it's the front line. It's the front line. I mean, and everybody's fighting each other.
But you are
it's not the regime.
No.
I was there. I mean, I was there. We were threatened by snipers in the castle. Okay, we tried to make it to the top of the castle, and it was too dangerous.
It's unbelievable.
So, all right,
you are justifying
the front line is right there.
To use chemical weapons and napalm and phosphor.
People are fighting
because
each other.
The Americans
so it's not only one side that are using the castle
which they
to fight the
consider
other.
him a dictator, but they apologized. They apologized to him.
It's war.
It's war, but you said like they have the same weapons, but
and they do have the same weapons. They got very efficient snipers on both sides.
They are using napalm, phosphor.
I'm going to have to leave it there, unfortunately.
Things you cannot prove, of course.
Unfortunately,
I just want to say something. There are
one sentence, because we're out of time.
300,000 of civilians now are under target of the Russians and the regime. And there are people just like every one of us. And we should protect them from this barbarian war, from the Russians and from the regime.
And from Al-Qaeda. Thank you very little.
Yeah. And from Hezbollah and from all Shia militias.
Abdelkader Zalka, Régis Le Sommier. Dr. Zahra Salul, I want to thank you for joining us from Chicago. I want to thank as well Alison Muse in Beirut. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next.
Thank you.
And we say hello to James Creedon. James, something really important in all of this is if attention is glazed over in the Western media, it's because after a while it just becomes numbers when there's too many victims. However, this story that's come out in the last 24 hours of the tweets purportedly of a 7-year-old girl.
That's right. Bana Al-Abad is her name, and her mother, Fatima, is tweeting from eastern Aleppo, and it has been picked up by media around the world. For example, yesterday her Twitter account had 18,000 followers. Today it is over 30,000, so it's almost doubled in just 24 hours. So it's drawing a lot of attention to the story of this 7-year-old girl, and who, via her mother, images like this are being put up online. You can see her here with her 2 brothers, and various messages such as this one: last night was a miracle. We are saved. The bombing hit directly the side of our house. Other messages going up: I want to live like the children of London, no bombing. And if there are people in Russia who care about humanity, stand up for us, please. So clearly there's a political perspective here being relayed by her mother, Fatima, but it is also giving the story of a 7-year-old girl who is not going to school right now, who is putting up messages like this: I'm reading to forget about the war. And it has captivated, I suppose, like any story of a human being, especially a child.
And are there ways to authenticate that it is from Aleppo?
Well, I guess for now, as we saw with the famous blog Gay Girl from Damascus back in 2011, there are cases where fake people will pretend to be in a certain place and tell a story, but for now there are no indications that this is a fake story. She's even been interviewed, as I can see by ITV News in the UK and stuff like that. So it does seem to be a real story. I am very afraid I will die tonight. That these bombs will kill me. Now, CNN have done an interesting thing here. You were talking about figures, Francois. They are asking, I suppose, because this has been going on for years and years now, the attention of the Western public is perhaps waning, despite the fact that we're at a crisis moment and a key point in this conflict. What would make you care about Aleppo, asks CNN on their website today. It's been shared a lot, and they're asking, would it be pictures, for example? And they give a catalogue of terrible photos. Would it be the numbers, 96 children killed in less than a week, according to UNICEF? Or would it be stories, for example, the story we were just talking about, Bana? We also had the story of Aylan Kurdi, the story of Umran. So that does seem to captivate the public in a way that draws them in. to perhaps the broader context to understand how these children are caught up in the story. I mean, I suppose it's just quite human.
Quite human. Régis Sommier, let me ask you about this, because it's clearly, when you come back from Aleppo, it's tough selling the story after 5.5 years of civil war.
You mean people don't want to read this story about Aleppo? I don't think so. I think people are interested in. I mean, I've got many reactions to my story. One of them was that it was fair and balanced, and I try to to grasp, looking, and especially the intensity of the airstrike, which I witnessed, and I reported on that. I was one of the only Western reporter in Western Aleppo. So you might argue that on the government side, you're going to be drived around and see things that you don't that they want you to see. But I must say that no Western reporters are allowed to report directly from the ground on the eastern side without endangering their life or risking to be kidnapped, because of course, as we know, Al-Qaeda has kidnapped some journalists. Not only the Islamic State had done that, but a lot of and recently a German reporter, freelancer, was released. So it's too dangerous to go there. I must pay a tribute to the AFP people over there who are doing a remarkable job trying to grasp the situation, and there are a lot reporting from the
eastern side.
From the eastern side. But other than that, each group has their own media. They have their own, and they can tell you whatever they want. So you have not seen independent reporting in the eastern side, and I would love to see more of that. And so if the rebels or whoever governs, because it seems to be unclear, that part of the city allow some journalists, or Western journalists, to go there and see by themselves.
Well, second best is fact-checking, and for that I thank you, James Creedon, for that. Thank you very much for being with us here in the France 24 debate.